You're not getting on this jet." The words cracked across the private airfield like a warning siren, sharp enough to stop conversations and turn heads. At 8:14 a.m. on a clear Texas morning, the sleek Gulfstream G700 sat waiting on the tarmac outside Dallas Executive Airport, its polished white fuselage reflecting the rising sun. A flight crew in tailored Navy uniforms moved with practiced precision around the aircraft, checking manifests, loading luggage, and greeting arriving passengers. Then everything changed. Monica Hayes slowed her pace at the bottom of the boarding stairs and looked directly at the woman blocking her path. The chief flight attendant, Rebecca Collins, stood with her arms folded and a tablet pressed against her chest. Her smile was gone. Her posture said the conversation was already over. "Excuse me?" Monica asked calmly. Rebecca glanced at her once more, taking in the dark jeans, simple black jacket, and carry-on bag. Nothing about Monica matched whatever image Rebecca had in mind for someone flying aboard a private jet worth tens of millions of dollars. "This aircraft isn't accepting additional passengers," Rebecca said. "You'll need to step aside." A few nearby travelers exchanged curious looks. Monica didn't move. A warm breeze rolled across the tarmac, carrying the distant hum of engines preparing for departure. "I'm not an additional passenger," Monica replied. "Then what's your name?" Rebecca asked. "Monica Hayes." Rebecca tapped her tablet, frowned dramatically, and shook her head. "No, you're not on my boarding list." The answer came too quickly, too confidently. Monica had spent decades reading people. She recognized the look immediately. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't a mistake. It was judgment. Behind Rebecca, a pilot carrying a leather flight case paused long enough to listen. A ground coordinator glanced over from a fuel truck. The atmosphere around the jet shifted. Not loud, not chaotic, just charged, like a storm beginning miles away. Monica reached into her pocket and produced her boarding authorization. Rebecca barely looked at it. "I'm afraid this document won't help," she said. "You'll need to leave the boarding area." Monica's expression remained steady. The same steady expression that had carried her through boardroom negotiations, hostile acquisitions, and billion-dollar decisions. She had seen doors close before. She had heard voices like this before. But hearing them here felt different. The Gulfstream stood less than 30 feet away. The aircraft gleamed under the morning sun. And yet somehow she was being treated like she didn't belong anywhere near it. A businessman waiting nearby shifted uncomfortably. Another passenger lowered his sunglasses and stared. Rebecca pointed toward the terminal. "Ma'am, let's not make this difficult." Monica looked past her, up the boarding stairs, then back at the woman determined to keep her out. She spoke softly enough that Rebecca almost missed it. "You should check that list again." Rebecca laughed under her breath. "Trust me, I already did." For a brief moment, neither woman moved. The wind fluttered the edge of Monica's jacket. The engines remained silent. The crew continued working. But something beneath the surface had already begun. Because Rebecca Collins believed she was turning away an ordinary traveler. In exactly 14 minutes, she would discover she had just denied boarding to the woman who owned the jet. Monica Hayes watched Rebecca for another second, then slipped the boarding authorization back into her jacket pocket. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. That was what surprised people most when they underestimated her. They expected frustration. They expected anger. Instead, they got patience. And patience made people reveal far more than they intended. The private airfield stretched across nearly 200 acres under a cloudless Texas sky. Luxury aircraft lined the distant ramps. Executives hurried between terminals. Ground crews moved baggage carts across the concrete. Everything looked polished, professional, controlled. Yet Monica had learned years ago that culture was never measured by appearances. It was measured by how people treated someone they believed had no power. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we are glad you are here. Now, back to Monica Hayes. At 44 years old, Monica had built Hayes Global Holdings into one of the most influential logistics and aviation companies in North America. Her organization operated cargo fleets, charter services, maintenance facilities, and private aviation assets across multiple states. Financial magazines called her one of the most disciplined executives in the industry. Employees often described her differently. They said she listened more than she spoke. That quality had brought her to Dallas that morning. 3 months earlier, Hayes Global had acquired a boutique private aviation company whose customer satisfaction scores looked impressive on paper. The reports were clean. The numbers were strong. Yet anonymous complaints kept surfacing. Travelers described being judged by appearance. Some claimed they were treated differently based on race, clothing, or assumptions about wealth. Monica wanted answers. Not reports. Not summaries. Answers. So she arrived alone. No assistance. No corporate security. No designer labels. No announcement. The woman standing beside the jet was not supposed to see a billionaire executive. She was supposed to see an ordinary customer. And that was exactly what Rebecca Collins saw. The chief flight attendant exchanged a glance with another crew member, a tall blond man named Daniel Mercer, who served as the lead cabin specialist. He approached slowly, carrying a clipboard beneath one arm. "Everything okay here?" he asked. Rebecca nodded. "Just someone trying to board the wrong aircraft." Daniel looked Monica up and down before offering a polite smile that never reached his eyes. "This is a private flight, ma'am." Monica noticed the emphasis. Private, as though she needed the concept explained. "I am aware," she replied. Daniel's smile faded. Nearby, a middle-aged businessman wearing an expensive gray suit paused while checking messages on his phone. He looked between Monica and the crew. The tension was becoming difficult to ignore. Monica remained still. The Gulf Stream stood behind them like a silent witness. Every polished surface reflected the morning sunlight. Every detail represented years of work, sacrifice, and decisions made long before anyone on this tarmac had heard her name. Yet none of that mattered at this moment. All Rebecca saw was a black woman in simple clothes. All Daniel saw was someone who did not match their expectation. And as the minutes continued to tick away toward departure, neither of them realized they were stepping directly into the most expensive mistake of their careers. The atmosphere on the tarmac tightened another degree. What had started as a single disagreement was slowly becoming something larger. Rebecca no longer stood alone. Daniel shifted closer to her side, and within moments 2 additional crew members emerged from the aircraft cabin. One was a flight coordinator named Karen Whitmore. The other was a young operations assistant named Mark Ellis. Neither knew exactly what was happening. They simply recognized the familiar signal that someone had been identified as a problem. Karen glanced at Monica and immediately aligned herself with the others. "Is she still here?" she asked. Rebecca nodded. "She refuses to leave." Monica almost smiled at the wording. Refuses to leave. As if she had wandered into a restricted area instead of arriving for a scheduled flight. Daniel folded his arms. "We have paying passengers waiting to board." The statement lingered in the air. Monica noticed the businessman in the gray suit look up from his phone again. A younger woman carrying a laptop case slowed her pace nearby. More eyes were turning toward the scene. Rebecca seemed to notice the attention and straightened her posture. "Ma'am, we have explained the situation several times." Monica tilted her head slightly. "Actually, you have not explained anything. You simply decided I do not belong on that aircraft." Daniel let out a short laugh. Nobody said that. The response came too quickly, too defensively. Monica had heard versions of it her entire life. The message was always the same. Nobody says the quiet part out loud. They simply act on it. A fuel truck rolled past in the distance. The low rumble briefly filled the silence. Then Karen stepped forward holding a printed passenger manifest. "There is no reason to keep delaying departure," she said. "Her name is not here." Monica noticed something interesting. Karen never looked at the list. She simply trusted what she had been told. That was how cultures failed. One assumption became 2. 2 became 4. Eventually nobody questioned anything. They just joined in. Rebecca pointed toward the terminal building almost 200 yards away. "The airport lounge is available if you need assistance finding your charter company." Several crew members exchanged faint smiles. Small smiles. Confident smiles. The kind people wore when they believed the room agreed with them. Monica remained exactly where she was. The Gulfstream's polished windows reflected the entire scene back at her. For crew members now stood united against one woman carrying a single travel bag. Daniel checked his watch. "We are done here." Monica met his eyes. "Are we?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. It vanished quickly, but she saw it. Around them, passengers continued arriving. Some slowed to watch. Some pretended not to. The businessman in the gray suit had stopped walking altogether. The woman with the laptop remained nearby. Even a baggage handler paused for a moment before returning to work. The crew thought they were protecting authority. In reality, they were performing for an audience they did not realize was already judging them. And somewhere inside the aircraft, hidden within documents none of them had bothered to verify, was a single designation that would soon change everything. Owner authorization. The departure clock continued counting down. 8 minutes remained before the scheduled wheels up time, yet nobody seemed focused on the flight anymore. Attention had shifted entirely to the woman standing at the bottom of the stairs. Monica noticed movement near the service entrance beside the hangar. A young employee wearing a reflective safety vest stepped out carrying a tablet. His name badge read Ethan Brooks, 26 years old. Operations support. The kind of employee most executives never noticed. The kind who usually noticed everything. Ethan had heard fragments of the exchange while updating fuel records inside the operations office. At first, he assumed it was a routine boarding issue. Those happened every week. But something about the tension outside felt different. Rebecca spotted him approaching. Ethan, perfect timing, she said. Can you confirm this passenger is not on today's manifest? Ethan accepted the tablet from Karen and began scrolling. Monica watched quietly. Unlike the others, Ethan was actually reading. His eyes moved carefully line by line. The confident expression on Rebecca's face remained unchanged. Daniel folded his arms again. Karen glanced toward the aircraft door. Everyone expected confirmation. Everyone expected the issue to disappear. Then Ethan stopped scrolling. His eyebrows pulled together. He blinked once and looked at the screen again. A second later, he zoomed in. Rebecca noticed immediately. What is it? She asked. Ethan hesitated. That is strange. The confidence around him began to crack. Daniel stepped closer. What is strange? Ethan swallowed. There is a Monica Hayes listed. Silence settled over the group. Rebecca laughed softly. Then remove the confusion and verify it is not her. Ethan continued reading. The color in his face shifted. Actually, he stopped speaking. The words seemed trapped somewhere between his throat and the screen. Monica could see the exact moment uncertainty entered the room. Rebecca reached for the tablet. Ethan instinctively pulled it closer. Not out of defiance. Out of disbelief. What? Rebecca demanded. Ethan looked directly at her. This profile is different. Daniel frowned. Different how? Ethan stared at the display another second. His voice lowered. I have never seen this authorization level before. Karen leaned over his shoulder. The moment she saw the screen, her expression changed too. Not dramatically. Just enough. A tiny shift. A crack in certainty. Rebecca grew impatient. Read it. Ethan hesitated again. Then he did. Passenger designation, Monica Hayes. He paused. Flight status, confirmed. Another pause. Longer this time. Authorization level. The words hung in the warm Texas air. Nearby passengers were openly watching now. Even the businessman in the gray suit had stopped pretending not to listen. Ethan finally finished reading. Owner authorization. Nobody spoke. For a brief second, the entire tarmac seemed to stop moving. Rebecca's smile vanished. Daniel looked from Ethan to Monica and back again. Karen stared at the tablet as though it had suddenly switched languages. Monica remained perfectly still. She said nothing. She did not need to. Sometimes truth entered a room quietly. Sometimes it arrived as a single line on a screen. And for the first time that morning, the people determined to remove her were beginning to wonder if they had misunderstood something far more important than a boarding list. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but it felt much longer. Rebecca recovered first. People who built their confidence on assumptions rarely surrendered them quickly. She reached for the tablet again and forced a smile that looked more strained than professional. There has to be some kind of mistake, she said. Ethan did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the screen. The authorization level was still there. Owner authorization. Clear. Unambiguous. Daniel stepped closer. Let me see that. Ethan handed him the tablet. Daniel scanned the information, then frowned. Monica watched the shift happen in real time. Not acceptance. Resistance. The human mind often fought hardest against facts that threatened its conclusions. This does not prove anything, Daniel said. It could be an administrative error. Karen nodded quickly. Exactly. Rebecca's confidence returned by a fraction. Thank you. Finally, someone is making sense. Around them, the small audience continued to grow. The businessman in the gray suit moved closer. The woman with the laptop stood less than 20 feet away now. Two arriving passengers paused beside a baggage cart. The story was spreading without anyone saying a word. Monica looked toward the aircraft. Sunlight reflected across the cockpit windows. For a brief moment, she remembered another morning many years earlier. She had been 23 years old, standing in a regional airport outside Atlanta. She had saved 4 months to attend an executive leadership conference. Her ticket was valid. Her reservation was confirmed. Yet an employee behind the counter had looked at her, then at the ticket, then back at her again. "Are you sure this belongs to you?" he had asked. Monica still remembered the feeling. Not anger, not embarrassment, something heavier. The exhaustion of realizing that evidence was never enough for certain people. She remembered sitting alone near the gate afterward, listening as other passengers boarded without question. Nobody had checked their identity twice. Nobody had challenged whether they belonged. That memory lingered like an old scar beneath fresh skin. Back on the tarmac, Rebecca crossed her arms again. "Until we receive clarification, she is not boarding." Ethan looked stunned. "But the system literally says owner authorization." Rebecca turned sharply toward him. "And I said we need clarification." The words landed harder than she intended. Several nearby witnesses exchanged glances. Even Daniel appeared uncomfortable. Monica finally spoke. "Interesting." Rebecca looked at her. "What is?" Monica's voice remained calm. "You trusted the system when you thought it supported your conclusion. The moment it disagreed with you, the system became unreliable." Nobody answered. A light breeze swept across the airfield. Somewhere in the distance, another aircraft taxied toward a runway. The world kept moving. But on this patch of concrete, something important had changed. The crew was no longer debating whether Monica existed in the records. They were debating whether they wanted to believe what the records were telling them. And with each passing minute, the crowd watching the exchange was beginning to reach its own conclusion. The situation should have ended the moment the authorization appeared on the screen. Instead, it became something else entirely. Rebecca took a slow breath and stepped between Monica and the aircraft stairs as if a digital record carried less weight than her personal judgment. The move did not go unnoticed. Several witnesses exchanged looks. The businessman in the gray suit lowered his phone and openly watched now. The woman with the laptop quietly opened her camera application. Nobody was speaking much anymore. They were observing, measuring, deciding. Daniel handed the tablet back to Ethan. "Until management verifies this information, nobody boards." Ethan looked confused. "Nobody?" Daniel nodded. "Nobody." The statement rippled through the crowd. Delaying a private flight was not a small decision. Every minute cost money. Every minute created questions. Monica glanced at the aircraft door, then at the crew standing in front of her. What fascinated her was not their resistance. She had expected resistance. What fascinated her was how quickly ordinary people could convince themselves that evidence did not matter once a conclusion had already been chosen. Rebecca shifted her weight and looked directly at Monica. "People like us have responsibilities," she said. "We cannot just let anyone walk onto an aircraft because they claim they belong there." The words landed heavily. Several witnesses frowned. Monica heard the phrase clearly. People like us. Not crew members. Not employees. Something else. Something broader. Something older. Monica remained calm. "And what exactly qualifies someone to belong here?" Rebecca immediately realized the trap in the question. For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked away. Daniel stepped in before the silence could grow. "This is about procedure." Monica almost smiled. Procedure. Another familiar word. Over the years, she had learned that procedure often appeared whenever someone needed a respectable disguise for poor judgment. A gust of wind swept across the tarmac, fluttering loose paperwork on a nearby service cart. The morning sun climbed higher above the horizon. Time continued moving. So did consequences. Monica reached into her pocket and removed her phone. Rebecca noticed instantly. "Who are you calling?" Monica unlocked the screen. "Someone who can help." Daniel laughed softly. "A lawyer?" Monica looked at him. "No." The answer unsettled him more than she expected. Ethan remained nearby, still holding the tablet. He kept reading the authorization file over and over as though hoping it would suddenly change. It never did. Owner authorization remained exactly where it had always been. Finally, Monica selected a contact and raised the phone to her ear. The call connected before the first ring could finish. "Good morning, Tanya," Monica said. Her voice was calm, measured, almost relaxed. Across the line, Tanya Reed answered immediately. "Good morning, Monica. Is everything proceeding as expected?" Monica glanced toward Rebecca, Daniel, Karen, and the aircraft behind them. Then she looked at the growing crowd of witnesses who had seen every minute unfold. "Actually," she said quietly, "I think it is time to freeze the flight." For the first time that morning, uncertainty spread across every face standing between her and the jet. The reaction was immediate, though not in the way anyone expected. Rebecca folded her arms tighter and exchanged a glance with Daniel. Both seemed convinced that Monica was bluffing. People with authority often believe they could recognize power on sight. That belief had carried them through the entire morning. It was carrying them now. "Freeze the flight," Rebecca repeated with a faint laugh. "You do not have that kind of authority." Monica did not answer. She simply listened. On the other end of the call, Tanya Reed was already moving. Tanya had worked beside Monica for nearly 11 years. She knew the difference between a routine request and a serious one. This was serious. "Understood," Tanya said. "Initiating review protocol now." The call ended. Silence returned. For several seconds, nothing happened. Rebecca's confidence began to recover. Daniel glanced toward the aircraft and shrugged. Karen looked relieved. Even a few of the witnesses appeared uncertain. Then Ethan's tablet chimed. The sound was soft, barely noticeable, yet every head turned toward him. Ethan looked down. His eyes widened. "What?" Daniel asked. Ethan swallowed. "The flight status changed." Rebecca stepped forward. "Changed how?" Ethan stared at the screen. "Temporary operational hold." Nobody spoke. Karen immediately pulled out her own device. A second later, it chimed too. Her face lost color. Daniel reached for his phone. Within moments, another notification appeared. Then another. The aircraft management system had flagged the flight for executive review. Boarding authorization was suspended. Departure clearance was paused. Fuel release approval was locked. Every step required for takeoff had suddenly stopped moving. The crowd felt it before they understood it. The atmosphere shifted. Confidence drained from the crew and flowed somewhere else. Rebecca looked toward Monica again. For the first time all morning, uncertainty outweighed certainty. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Monica looked at the aircraft. The Gulf Stream remained exactly where it had been 10 minutes earlier. The difference was that now everyone else was beginning to realize they no longer controlled what happened next. Daniel attempted to recover. This could happen for many reasons. Ethan glanced at him. "Not like this." Daniel looked away. The businessman in the gray suit checked his phone and stepped closer. "Executive review protocols are not random," he said. Nobody asked for his opinion, but nobody interrupted him either. He had spent enough years around corporate aviation to recognize what he was seeing. Something significant had entered the picture. Karen refreshed her screen again. A new message appeared. She read it twice, then a third time. "There is another designation," she whispered. Rebecca grabbed the device. Her eyes moved across the text. Every ounce of confidence vanished. Monica watched quietly as the realization spread from one face to another. Not all at once. One person at a time. Like lights switching on in a dark building. Whatever they thought they understood about this morning was beginning to collapse. And for the first time since she arrived at the bottom of those boarding stairs, nobody was telling Monica Hayes where she belonged. Rebecca stared at the screen as though the words might rearrange themselves into something safer. They did not. The designation remained exactly where it had been all along. Executive asset owner. Direct authority. Priority override. Every line pointed to the same conclusion. Daniel read the notification over her shoulder and took a slow step backward. Karen lowered her eyes. Ethan simply stood there, caught between disbelief and vindication. Around them, the witnesses sensed the shift immediately. Nobody knew every detail yet, but everyone could see the balance of power changing. Monica slipped her phone back into her pocket and looked toward the aircraft. The morning sun reflected across the polished fuselage like a spotlight. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Rebecca finally found her voice. "Who are you?" The question sounded different now. Earlier it had been dismissive. Now it carried uncertainty. Monica met her eyes. "I am the person you never bothered to identify before deciding I did not belong." The words settled heavily across the tarmac. Daniel glanced toward Ethan's tablet again. "There has to be an explanation." Ethan nodded slowly. "There is." He turned the screen around so everyone could see it. Her name is attached to the ownership records. Silence followed. Complete silence. Even the distant sounds of airport operations seemed farther away. The businessman in the gray suit shook his head. You stopped the owner from boarding her own aircraft. Nobody corrected him. Nobody could. Karen pressed a hand against her forehead. Rebecca looked at Monica as if seeing her for the first time. The simple jacket. The travel bag. The calm posture. None of it had changed. The only thing that had changed was what Rebecca now knew. Monica noticed that realization too. Interesting, isn't it? She said quietly. Rebecca swallowed. What is? Monica glanced toward the crowd. 10 minutes ago, you were completely certain about who I was. Now you are completely uncertain. Yet I have not changed at all. The observation landed harder than any accusation could have. Several witnesses exchanged knowing looks. The woman with the laptop lowered her camera for a moment and nodded to herself. Daniel opened his mouth, searching for words that would repair what had happened. None came. At that exact moment, Monica's phone vibrated. A video call request appeared on the screen. Tanya Reed. Monica accepted it and held the phone where everyone could see. Tanya appeared immediately from a corporate conference room. Her expression was professional and composed. Good morning, Monica. The review is complete. Every eye turned toward the screen. Tanya continued. Ownership records have been verified. Flight operations confirm your authority over this aircraft and its assigned personnel. Rebecca's face lost its remaining color. Daniel looked away. Karen closed her eyes briefly. Monica nodded once. Then she delivered the sentence that stopped the entire airfield cold. I was never trying to prove that I belonged on this aircraft. I was trying to see how you treat people when you think they do not matter. No one spoke after that. The words lingered in the air long after Monica finished saying them. The private airfield felt different now. The same aircraft stood on the same stretch of concrete. The same crew stood in the same positions. Yet everything had changed. A few hours earlier, confidence and assumptions had controlled the situation. Now only facts remained. Tanya's voice continued from the phone. Monica, the executive review board has completed its assessment. We have verified witness statements, operational records, communication logs, and boarding procedures from this morning. Rebecca stared at the ground. Daniel's shoulders lowered. Karen remained silent. Ethan watched quietly from the edge of the group. The witnesses listened carefully. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. The atmosphere felt almost suspended, as if everyone understood they were standing inside a moment that would be remembered long after the day ended. Tanya continued. The findings show multiple failures in professional conduct, passenger verification procedures, and company service standards. A notification sounded almost simultaneously from several devices. Rebecca looked at hers first. Daniel checked his phone seconds later. Karen's screen lit up as well. Their access credentials had been suspended pending final review. The realization settled over them immediately. The expressions on their faces shifted from disbelief to understanding. This was no longer a disagreement. No longer a misunderstanding that could be explained away. The process had run its course, and the outcome had arrived. Monica did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply listened. Years of leadership had taught her that accountability was not about humiliation. It was about consequences. Real leadership never found satisfaction in someone else's downfall. It found value only in ensuring standards remained intact. Tanya's voice remained calm and professional. Effective immediately, Rebecca Collins, Daniel Mercer, and Karen Whitmore are relieved of flight duties pending termination processing and final human resources review. The words landed with the quiet force of a closing door. No shouting, no drama, just finality. Around them, the witnesses exchanged glances. The businessman in the gray suit slowly shook his head. The woman with the laptop closed her camera and slipped it into her bag. Another passenger who had remained silent throughout the morning folded his arms and looked toward the aircraft, reflecting on how quickly appearances can influence judgment. Even they understood that this moment was bigger than a single flight, bigger than one employee dispute. It was about culture, about values, about what happens when assumptions replace professionalism. Rebecca finally looked up. I am sorry, she said softly. Monica studied her for a moment. The apology sounded genuine. There was regret in her voice. There was recognition, but it arrived after authority had been revealed, after ownership had been confirmed, after consequences had become unavoidable. The problem was never that you did not know who I was, Monica replied. The problem was how you treated someone you believed had no power. Nobody argued with her. Nobody could. The statement settled over the group with uncomfortable honesty. Daniel lowered his eyes. Karen stared into the distance. Even Ethan felt the weight of the lesson. Tanya spoke once more. Replacement crew members are already en route. Flight operations will resume shortly. Monica nodded. Thank you, Tanya. The call ended. For a few seconds, only the sound of wind moving across the airfield remained. The distant hum of service vehicles echoed across the tarmac. Somewhere in the background, a maintenance crew continued their work, completely unaware of the lesson that had just unfolded nearby. Then Monica turned toward Ethan. You did the right thing today. Ethan looked surprised. I just read what was there. Monica smiled slightly. That is exactly why it mattered. The young employee nodded, understanding more than she said. Truth was often visible long before people were willing to accept it. Sometimes courage was not about making a grandstand. Sometimes it was simply refusing to ignore what was directly in front of you. Monica picked up her travel bag and walked toward the aircraft stairs. This time nobody blocked her path. Nobody questioned her presence. Nobody suggested she belonged somewhere else. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The same woman, the same boarding pass, the same flight. The only thing that had changed was what others believed about her. Halfway up the stairs, she paused and looked back across the tarmac. The morning sun reflected across the aircraft behind her, casting long golden light across the concrete. The witnesses watched in silence. The former crew stood quietly, confronting the choices that had brought them there. Some lessons arrive through training. Others arrive through experience. This one had arrived through consequences. Monica's final words carried across the airfield with calm certainty. Power does not reveal character. Treatment does. The way you treat people when you think they cannot change your future says everything about who you are. The statement lingered in the morning air long after she finished speaking. Nobody interrupted it. Nobody needed to, because everyone present understood its meaning. Then she turned, stepped into the aircraft she had always belonged on, and disappeared through the cabin door. Moments later, the stairs were removed. Ground crews completed their final checks. The engines slowly came to life. As the jet prepared for departure, the people standing on the tarmac remained where they were, watching it move. Some carried disappointment. Some carried regret. Others carried reflection. But all of them carried the same lesson. Respect should never be reserved for titles. Professionalism should never depend on status. And character is revealed most clearly not when power enters the room, but when people believe it never will. The aircraft accelerated down the runway and climbed into the bright Texas sky, leaving behind far more than an airfield. It left behind a standard that everyone who witnessed the events of that morning would remember for years to come.